Hi everyone, and welcome to another recipe video. This week I have a cake recipe inspired on the Daim candy bar. And if you've ever had this candy bar, you should know that it's basically this toffee covered in milk chocolate. So what I'm going to share with you is a cake made up of different components. We will have a hazelnut sponge cake layer with some creamy custardy filling, and then I'm going to glaze all of that with some chocolate. So those are three components. Those are the main components of the cake, and I'm starting here by separating 4 eggs. The yolks I'm gonna use for my custard filling and the whites for the hazelnut sponge. Now on to the main ingredient, the Daim candy bars. This is what they look like. So what I'm gonna do here is just to chop these as evenly as possible, and I'm trying to keep all those bits kind of the same size. And this is important because we're gonna cover the whole outer part of the cake with these. So once you're done with that, I suggest that you start by making the custard part of the filling. And that's because it needs to set in the fridge for a bit, and in the meantime you can work on the other components of the cake. So I have my egg yolks from those 4 eggs, and I'm just mixing in some of the sugar that is listed in the ingredients list. And to that, I'll add a little splash of vanilla. And you're gonna whisk these together until they're incorporated. It's not super important to add a lot of air right now. You just want to mix them very well. Now I've got a saucepan here, and I'm gonna put my whipping cream into the saucepan and bring it to a gentle boil. And if you have been following my videos, you will now recognize that this is a classic step in custard making. You have your egg mixture to which you add a warm element. In this case, I have the cream. Sometimes it's milk or whatever your recipe calls for, but this is a classic way of making custard, or the custard for ice cream, for example. Once you've added gently all of that heated cream, you can return the whole mixture to the saucepan. Don't worry, we're gonna pass this through a sieve later on. And you're gonna continue to cook this on medium to low heat until the whole thing thickens. It will take a few minutes, and at this point, don't do anything else. Just be focused on that mixture because you don't want it to burn, you want it to stick to the bottom, you want to stir continuously. And this is what it should look like once it's thickened. At that point, feel free to take it off the heat and pass it through the sieve. By straining this, we are making sure that there are no eggy bits lying around. We want a nice and creamy custard without any sort of chunky bits in there. Now this is ready to be chilled. I recommend at least 1 hour in the refrigerator. Make sure to cover this with some cling film, some plastic, and just press gently on the surface of the custard so that it doesn't form any skin. And the last component for the filling is butter. We're essentially making a custard-based buttercream. So I'm starting with some room temperature butter, and to that I'm gonna add the chilled custard. And we're gonna do this slowly but steadily. Make sure you fully beat the butter before you add the custard so that you don't have any sort of lumps in there. So once everything is nice, airy and smooth, you're done. You can chill this while you get your other components ready. Next up, we have the hazelnut sponge cake. And this is only using the egg whites from those 4 eggs. So it's a rather airy, fluffy sponge cake layer. So I'm gonna start by whipping those egg whites. Once I get some volume in there, it's looking kind of frothy, it's looking rather white, you can add the sugar. I've split the sugar in the description box as well. Some of it goes to the custard, some of it goes to the cake, so please pay attention to that. For the cake, we only need 100 grams. You want to add your sugar gradually. Don't just dump it all in because you might risk deflating the egg whites. Once you've added all the sugar, you can add a little bit of vanilla extract. You can see that it's turning glossy here. So we're not a long way away from soft peaks. We want something that is stable enough so that it holds its volume. So that's what I'm looking for. It's nice and glossy. It looks like marshmallow. And this is perfect for cake batters where you need to fold dry ingredients into them. So when you build this airy structure with the egg whites, it's important to use the folding technique for the dry ingredients. So I've got my hazelnut here, my ground hazelnut, a little bit of flour. So I'm gonna sprinkle some of it, not all. Again, you don't want to dump ingredients on those beautiful airy egg whites. You just dump a little bit and fold it in like so. This is enough for 2 20 centimeter in diameter cake pans. And the best way to kind of portion that is to use a piping bag. So I've got one right here and I'm just preparing my pans. I do line them with parchment at the bottom because it's so much easier to get them out of the pan. So we're gonna start from the center, just piping all the way around that. And once you've covered the surface, you stop and you move on to your next pan. I should also mention that I'm using a little bit of butter under the parchment so that it holds in place and doesn't move while I'm piping. So this one is done. And I do the same with the other one. As you can see here, they look pretty even in terms of height. And right now I'm just smoothing out the surface as much as possible. It's not totally necessary to do that. And that's what they look like when they come out of the oven. You want to wait until you run your palette knife all around the edges because they like to stick a little bit there, but it's no problem. And thankfully enough, that parchment is a total lifesaver. See? Nothing really sticks at the bottom, of course, and it's rather easy to peel. I like to start pulling from the outer part towards the center. I never peel off the parchment just in one direction. I like to move the cake around and see what feels easier for the cake. So that was the sponge cake. Now we move on to the chocolate glaze. And this is the absolute last component of this cake. And it's only got 2 ingredients. We have some milk chocolate and a little bit of coconut oil. The coconut oil really helps the whole thing be a bit more fluid, which is important when you're glazing something. And you might have seen this already in my Rocher glaze video. Now let's get to work. We're gonna put all of this together. I have my cooled sponge cake as my first layer, and I'm gonna dollop about 40% of that custard filling on top. And I'm just trying to build a thin layer of the filling. You don't want something too thick. It should be around 1/2 centimeter or so. Now with the help of my palette knife, I'm trying to move the frosting towards the ends or the edges of the cake. If you need a little bit more because you're seeing that the frosting is a bit thin, then feel free to add a little bit more. Once you have that filling layer done, go ahead and put the second sponge cake on top and gently press down in the center and cover with the rest of that custard buttercream. You want to cover the top and the sides of the cake with this frosting. It should be enough. You can be as neat as you want. I'm just trying to have a flat surface for my chocolate bark to stick to. So after chilling this for 1 hour, you can sprinkle some of that Daim bits that you've chopped all around the top and the sides. So for the sides, I'm just dumping them on my cake plate and then I pull them up with my fingers. Gently press them down into the custard buttercream and just try to spread them out as evenly as possible and have fun with it. Now, if you feel like your buttercream has gone too soft, then feel free to put it back in the fridge for a little bit before the glazing step. Otherwise, go ahead and pour that chocolate glaze on top. It should be at room temperature, okay? Otherwise, we risk melting the buttercream if you add it when it's too hot. Now, this is the trickiest part because you want to work quickly enough so that the chocolate doesn't set onto the cool surface. So I'm dumping the whole glaze at the top and I'm using my cooling rack and also my fingers sometimes to stop the cake from moving and just swirling it around. Try to cover as much surface as possible. And if you run into trouble, just grab a silicone spatula and start working that glaze onto the sides if you need to. Once you're done, then put this back in the fridge for a little bit before you cut it. And this cake already looks like a candy bar, right? It's such a treat. You could decorate it with a lot more Daim bars if you wanted to, some at the top maybe, after the glazing. I don't know, you can really have fun with it. And look at those layers. That's exactly what you're looking for. Not too much custard, not too much cake. I really hope you try this recipe, and if you do, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Please share and like my video, and don't forget to subscribe for more.